Is your mind open to suggestion? Did you ever wonder what sneaky little messages may be wrapped up in the advertising that you see every day on any given day at any given moment? The unconscious is something that I've always been interested in, and today I'd like to take a look at what subliminal messaging is, how and why it's used, and does it actually work? According to the article Subliminal Stimulation, an Overview, John McConnell, Richard Cutler, and Elton McNeil note that the definition of subliminal messaging is the presentation of certain stimuli below the level of conscious awareness that influences people's behavior significantly. So what does this mean to you? What it means is that the information that you may or may not want to know is actually reaching your brain without your being aware of it. And it actually does affect people's behavior. Research into these types of messages dates back to the 1800s, where experiments were conducted to see if people could receive messages below the level of consciousness. Studies had found that messages both visually and in auditory form were received by the subjects involved. Now that we know what subliminal messaging and communication is all about, let's go ahead and take a look at how it's used. Subliminal messages can come to you in the form of visual messages that are inserted into something that you may be watching, for example, a TV show or a movie. The article that I noted earlier speaks about messages that were inserted into movies. Subliminal messaging can also come to you in the form of auditory. According to the article Subliminal Messages Between the Devil and the Media, John Vokey and J. Don Reed note that there was a phenomenon which was actually called backmasking, very popular in the 80s, when they alleged that there was an allegation that subliminal messages were being recorded into popular music. Now, knowing this information, let's go ahead and take a look at why these messages may be used without the consumer's knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, the alleged messages that were recorded into popular songs these songs were actually played backward, and it was found that there were some possible evil messages that were within the song and could have a negative effect on the youth that were actually listening to the music. As a product of the 80s, and this was actually my music, I personally don't buy this, and I think that anything that was found in the music was merely a coincidence in this particular case. Another valid reason for the use of these kinds of messages actually is for advertising purposes. One example of how advertisers are using messaging is that they have the knowledge that sex actually sells in the United States and all over the world. And they're incorporating sexual imagery within verbal and pictorial content that they are advertising in order to sell their products. And that's according to Vokey and Reed. Lastly, we need to ask, is there evidence regarding this type of communication? Does it actually work? Now, I found conflicting information on the validity of subliminal messaging. According to an article that I read called An Experimental Investigation of Subliminal Perception, John Champion and Weld Turner actually conducted an experiment with Sales Group where they were given subliminal messages, and the results turned out to be very different than what you would expect if subliminal perception actually did exist. The other two articles that I had mentioned previously, though, they show different results on experiments that were conducted. Now, namely, the one that I had mentioned about the movies, they actually went ahead and took pictures of Coca-Colas and popcorn and inserted it into a movie, and it made a profound effect on the purchasing that was actually made during those movies at the concession stand. I think that what it all boils down to is how suggestible you are as an individual. I think it differs for everybody, and what physiological factors, such as fatigue, may be involved in how suggestible your unconscious is. Now that I've given you a lot to think about, let's go ahead and take a look at what we covered. We defined subliminal communication and had gotten some background on it. We also talked about why and how it's used and whether it's actually a valid form of communication. Now, I hope that you'll take away some knowledge and interest in the messages that you are receiving constantly and on a daily basis. I wonder what your thoughts will be the next time you see a movie or listen to a song or thumb through a magazine. I hope that you're going to be wondering what's actually seeping into your unconscious.